This is Show Up as a Leader, a show from People Forward Network, helping you maximize your positive impact on the world by becoming your best, fully authentic self.
Hey everyone, it's Rosie. I'm super excited to have my friend Chris Johnson bring her new series, The Leadership Pause, to the show. In this series, Chris is going to unpack what it means to be fully human and access the best of who we are as leaders. And each episode is going to include stories, what she refers to as nerd science, which just is music to my ears. And she will always give a deliberate practice that we can try on at the end and apply so that we can show up as more embodied learners and leaders in our life. Take a listen.
The portal to perspective, working with triggers. The reality of our ever-changing VUCA world challenges our identity as a leader who can control events or make things happen. It's increasingly harder and harder to do. Our responses to complexities are determined by our current mindset, our view of stress or stress mindset. Is stress debilitating or enhancing? When we complain about or rant about an experience as stressful, it's less a descriptor of the actual situation out there than it is a reflection of where we're at in the moment in here in our own experience. Increasing complexity activates our natural tendencies to avoid, pushing away what's threatening or unsettling, or to cling to what's worked in the past because things shouldn't be as they are, but different, right? Ultimately, we experience intense situations as grueling because they call into question our sense of who we are, our sense of self, our identity, our leadership identity. We default to doing what worked in the past, and we end up reinforcing old identity strategies. You know, he's a problem solver, she's super results-oriented, he's a high performer, she's a networking maven. Our very identities can feel on the line or up for grabs when we're triggered. Let's just face it. While knowing that what got you here won't get you there, it's still amazing how often we cling to what we've known to do in the past. Habits are very, very profound. So let's consider triggers. If you've ever felt off kilter or out of sorts or lost your composure or reacted defensively in the moment, come on, I know I'm not alone. You know then what it's like to be triggered. It can feel as though something has grabbed you by the throat, effectively yanking you out of the moment and disorienting you. These two distinctions will help you improve your understanding of how triggers might influence your behavior. A trigger can be direct or indirect. Direct triggers are immediate, and we react immediately, like when I had to slam on my brakes to avoid hitting one of the boys on my block who was fielding a ball. An indirect trigger, however, is out of consciousness. We're not aware of it. Like when you heard that song from your senior year in high school and memories of your sister of that summer and the summer trip you took popped in. You called your sister. That's an indirect trigger. Triggers are not bad, by the way. They just are. They provoke us to be out of the moment that we're in and to be somewhere else. So triggers can be internal or external, too. External triggers come from the environment. We notice them via our senses, as well as with our thinking mind. Internal triggers, however, are generated within and often take the form of our inner critic or that inner little voice that we have. Becoming skillful as a conscious leader is being present to how our very identity gets triggered into reaction mode. Happens all day long if you're human, if you're normal, if you're a leader trying to do good work. Being triggered narrows our vision, heightens our anxiety, and throws us off instead of allowing us to stay fully engaged and present to the moment at hand. There are 4 domains to consider as we explore and then turn to face our triggers. We want to run toward the triggers, not away from them. These domains are interwoven like a braid, these 4, yet when we're triggered, they can seem indistinguishable from each other. The first that we notice sort of quickly is mental. This involves noticing where our thoughts go, maybe to blame or self-defense, justification, self-recrimination, feeling like an imposter, all that stuff is in the mental domain. Number 2 is emotional. This is a wide variety of emotions that can arise, that can be really subtle or very strong. Mild irritation, anger, anxiety, fear, self-righteousness. Emotions arise in a particular moment in time against the backdrop of a mood, which exists on the longer horizon of time. So for example, I might be irritated that somebody cut me off in traffic, or worse, in a meeting, cut me off and didn't let me finish my thought, right? But the larger background of my mood might be, am I a pretty open person? Or am I pretty closed down and have to be right all the time? So emotions are more in the moment against the backdrop of a bigger mood. Number 3, as a trigger, are the body sensations that we experience that we often override and don't pay attention to. Sensations such as tension, the neck, the shoulders, the jaw, the hands, tightness, constriction, flow, temperature, all of these offer clues about the strategies that we've used over time to craft and shape and cultivate our identities. They're often the clues that can take us into a new level of our own identity and leadership. Number 4, energy. Is it flagging, energized, numb, flat, upbeat? These are all examples of how our life force, our energy, is impacted by our mindset and moods that show up in our living bodies. As conscious leaders, we can take comfort in Jungian analyst James Hollis's words. You're, quote, summoned to leave behind the controlling power of your history, read identity, and to talk through the doorway to a new power, and I dare say perspective. When new power emerges, it's because the triggers not only activate us, but they reveal what we care most deeply about. Consider the following examples, each requiring a leaving behind in order to move forward. See which ones of these you relate to. A leader asking for greater focus must stop multitasking. A leader seeking candor must be forthright about herself and her behavior. A leader who strives for excellent customer service must attend to others' needs. A leader seeking a global presence must seek out diversity. A leader who wants real conversations must stop and listen. Paradoxically, by practicing pause in any of its permutations, you've heard many of them here, we create the open space to see and accept the reality of the current situation as inherently unpredictable and uncontrollable. Once we do that, it's only then that we can really begin to relax and be in the moment. This more settled acceptance not only allows us to view the situation at hand more broadly, see what we care about most deeply, and notice the bright fulgur at the horizon full of possibilities for new solutions. It builds the resilience of leadership presence that allows us to take on new perspectives and with them, new power. So let me give you a story. I told you that I would, and here I am. Derek is a general manager at a global environmental company. He's quick, likable, focused, and action-oriented. And he has a hair-trigger temper. When he came to see me as a client, his colleagues and direct reports called him defensive. This accurate truth pushed Derek to move at too quick a pace and kept him from being an optimal performer. People didn't want to be around him much. Derek needed to slow down in order to see what was going on around him versus simply reacting to each moment as if everything were a crisis. His identity was on the line. Coaching Derek over a 9-month period, I had him focus first on playing with space, one of the aspects of scope. Scope are the elements of the pause, but we'll get to that later. So again, I had him focus on playing with pace so he could begin to recognize his triggers. We began with a simple 2-part practice. At the moment he was triggered, he had to catch himself being himself. When he got reactive, he paused to observe what was going on internally, and then he would center himself with a pause, feeling his feet on the floor, feeling the length of his vertical line of dignity. Derek learned in a new felt sense way over time that he was chronically tense and exhausted. It surprised him. Not too long afterwards, 2 beliefs emerged from his experimentation that threaded through his triggered reaction. In fact, they drove his reactions, and he was surprised to learn them. The first, he believed that there's a right way to do this. And secondly, he believed, I have to work hard, always. These beliefs that he slowed down long enough to experience in his body, in his breath, in his mind, drove his body and his emotions. He was consistently impatient and irritable, which is why people said he was defensive. And ultimately, his actions. He drove people pretty hard. Hard driving both himself and his direct reports. By tuning into his triggers, not away from them, by tuning into his triggers, Derek had recognized his deep fatigue, how he actually contributed to it, and how it fueled his defensiveness. He was so relieved to know this happened. He was ready then to commit to a 3 times daily practice of pausing to simply check in on himself and examine his triggers. So 3 times a day, he'd take about 20-30 seconds, check in and say, how am I? Focus on his sensations, his experience of mood and emotions, how he was thinking. And he learned that he could choose to let go of his triggered reaction in the moment in order to reset his pace for the moment at hand, which helped his team, his direct reports, and ultimately he shifted his identity. Derek learned to slow down and take action steps that were much more effective, efficient, and on target. Within months, he reported, quote, feeling more clear-headed and better, and his colleagues in direct reports were also noticing a difference. They experienced him taking their perspective. Perspective taking is an innate human capacity that we all have. This ability to notice and read or feel into other people provides us a compass to navigate our own social world if we learn to use it. To attune in this way and feel into another person's emotions and experience is to have empathy, even to the point of feeling their experience in our own body too. As Derek learned and became more Derek, relaxing into himself, he smiled more. He engaged his team and colleagues more. He asked more questions more readily, and he incorporated their ideas about how to move with the business. Derek was on track to be faster, smarter, and better, on track for optimal performance. By working with his triggers, he gained a greater access to his best self and greater perspective as a leader. As always, I promised to share a practice. Here it is. Triggers open the door to perspective. Pause for a moment and breathe slowly for a bit, just settling into yourself. Maybe taking 2 or 3 deep breaths. As you pause to catch yourself, really tuning into your triggers, you'll inevitably notice what you're practicing, your own habits of mind that get hijacked, and the feelings and actions that make you, you. While we're in the midst of reacting to a trigger, it's likely, whether we're aware of it or not, that there's some internal line that was inadvertently or even purposefully crossed. Like Derek, our identity and our perspective may feel at risk. For now, in this practice, bring to mind a situation in which you were triggered, a situation in which your automatic reaction to threat showed up. I'd pick around a 5 on a 1 to 10 scale, not too triggering, but just enough so you can feel it for this practice. Allow the recollection to be as clear as possible. This might mean noticing where you were, who you were with, what was going on, what the time of year was. To pause and catch yourself can stir discomfort and raise questions. So as you bring that situation to mind, I call it a junior-sized triggering event, ask yourself these. What values did the trigger surface for you? What's your belief about how things should be that showed up? Can I admit to foibles in my leadership? What impact will it have if I admit to not knowing, not knowing what to do, when to do it, how to go about it, like Derek. Can vulnerability help or hurt me, my team, my network, my organization overall? What do I do with the emotions that get stirred inside of me? Observe your body's reactions as you simply recall your situation. How's your breath now? As you take one last cleansing breath, release all of that recollection and jot down any notes on what you're learning as you investigate your triggers. My invitation to you is to take this practice on, be curious, learn, and apply what you're learning to your leadership. I'm interested to know what opens up for you as you take yourself on. And as you can imagine, we're just scratching the surface. You'll find my website in the show notes below, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, also in the show notes. As you can imagine, being human, there's so much more to this topic. Triggers. We're triggered every day, all day long, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. But there is a lot to work with. I cover this in my book, The Leadership Pause. You can find it over on Amazon or at your favorite bookseller. And this spring, you can head on over to my website, q4-consulting.com/leadership advantage quiz to get a better feel for how your energy is showing up in your leadership and how you can work with it. As we sign off today, remember that the more attuned we are to the moment at hand, especially when we're triggered, whatever it holds, we can make our best contributions. This is power.
I'm Rosie Ward, and this is Show Up as a Leader. To learn more, head over to peopleforwardnetwork.com and, of course, hit that follow button.